Hi, we're here with Rich Spina today, and I'd like to start by asking you to give us your full name.
Richard Pasquale Humberto Spina, and I go with Richard P. Spina.
Okay.
Pasquale was my grandfather's name, and in the Italian tradition, you usually take, if not the first name, your middle initial of your paternal grandfather.
Okay. And where did the other part of the name come from?
That's my mother's father.
Okay.
So evidently there was a compromise at some point.
Did she not have brothers?
She did, and he passed away at a very early age. So she was really basically an only child.
So that would explain why both grandfathers.
Right.
Okay. Where were you born?
New York City, 1947.
Where did you go to school?
I started in New York City, PS2, in Jackson Heights, and went there until third grade. Then the big suburban wave, we moved out to Syosset, and I went through the Syosset public school district. Similar situation throughout suburbia. Every year I was in a different building until 10th grade in high school, where I was able to stay in the high school for 10, 11, 12. But we were always, they were always building a new school, and they were shuttling us around.
Well, yeah, we can relate to that in Brentwood, can't we?
Exactly.
Could you tell us about your mother and father?
Well, my grandparents immigrated to this country on my father's side in 1897. They were part of that Italian immigration. My father was born in 1914 in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. Out of 8 children, he was the only one to go to college. And the reason being was that he was very sickly as a child. And so instead of literally having to go out and get coal and wood and work at a very young age to support the family, he stayed indoors. And he gravitated towards reading and learning to occupy his time. By the time he was in junior high school, he was really pretty good student, and my grandparents recognized that and really encouraged him, and a lot of the family money went for him to go to a good high school and also then to go on to college. And he went to Fordham University. And what's interesting is, out of my generation of cousins, and there were about 15 of us from his brothers and sisters, myself and my brother are the only ones to go to college. Yeah. But all my cousins' children went to college. Yeah. So there was that first generation that really didn't get into college.
It bumped you up.
Right. Because he was able to go to college. Yeah. So, going to college does have an influence on the rest of the family.
The rest of the family, yeah. Being sickly certainly had an influence. So usually it's the other way around.
Yeah. But he was, there was just no television, no radio. Yeah. So we read. And my mother is a war bride. My father married her during World War II. She's from France and of Italian heritage. What's interesting is that my grandfather, my mother's father, when they were in Italy, was against Mussolini. He was an anti-fascist. And literally in the middle of the night, the priest came to them and said that he heard that the fascists were going to arrest him the next morning. And they literally just grabbed the valise, threw in what they could. And my grandmother, my grandfather, and my mother, who at the time was 6 months old, ran for the French border. And they immigrated to France and to escape from the fascists in Italy. They went through the same immigration problem that immigrants to this country today experience. They didn't know the language. They were really sort of like looked down upon because they were really a minority group in France. And I think, just to project a little bit, that experience being related to me and the experience that my grandparents had in New York City immigrating to this country made me very sympathetic to the kids in Brentwood that came from other countries and and their families were trying to make a new start. I really identified with that. Not that I was an immigrant, but just growing up, hearing all the stories, and always felt that we should extend ourselves as much as possible to the new students that come from other countries.
Yeah, we certainly do have a wide variety.
Yes.
Yeah. Last time I looked at the numbers, we had 67 different nationality
Yeah.
groups in Brentwood, which is just mind-boggling. How many children do you have in your?
I have 2 sons. One right now is 23. He graduated from college last year, University of Delaware, and he's working for a company called NVR Homes, which is a major home builder down south. He's living outside of Baltimore, and he's studying to be what they call a project supervisor. In other words, he would run the development of 20 or 30 homes that are being built.
Wow.
So he's in a training program for that. And his name is Christopher, and he was born on Christmas Eve, so you can figure out that connection. And then my younger son, Mark, M-E-R-C, is sophomore, finishing up his sophomore year at the University of Delaware, and he's a communications major.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned. Your parents met in Europe then,
Mm-hmm.
and your mother then had to come in under some very strange regulations that the service had.
Yes. It took quite a bit of paperwork. My father was an officer since he had been to college. When World War II started, he did volunteer at the age of 30 to fight. And he was caught up in that whole idea of, the way the African Americans wanted to fight to show that they as a group were really solid. The Japanese had their group of soldiers that, wanted to show that they were loyal. Well, there were a lot of Italians from the New York City area that volunteered to fight against Italy. Remember, at that time, Mussolini was really with Hitler and was part of the Axis powers. But the Italian men really felt that they had to demonstrate that they were really, American citizens. And so at the age of 30, he volunteered. Because he had the college education, he was, one of those 90-day wonders. He became a second lieutenant. And actually, he was with Patton and worked under Patton. Not directly, of course, but was in his army.
So he went up through the boot of Italy.
Yes. Yeah. But met my mother in France.
Very interesting story. I bet that's something you probably would like to tape with your father, is some of his experiences.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because he passed away about 10 years ago. And part of why I'm enjoying doing this right now is that I've often thought that we should really save these things for posterity. I think it would have been great. See, I heard all the stories. I was raised on Victory at Sea, and every Sunday, and I would be pointed out by my father. I was there. We did this. This is what really happened. They're not showing that, and I think it's important that we try and save as much of these experiences for the future as possible.
So clearly, he was an important influence on
absolutely,
your life.
Absolutely.
Were there other adults in your family that were an influence on you?
No, not really. He was the major. I mean, of course, my mother was loving and all that, but my father. You have to remember, he grew up on the streets of New York, so he was street smart. And the thing that probably influenced me the most was his expression that actions speak louder than words. And I have to say that the curse that he gave me is that I became a workaholic. Is that, rather than talk about doing it, I just did it. And that's probably a major influence in my life.
Probably good advice, too.
Yeah.
Can you remember the first job you ever had?
Yeah, I did yard work. I did yard work in the houses around our neighborhood, cutting the grass or weeding. From there, it went to newspapers, delivering newspapers. I had a paper route for about 2 years, and then I started working at 15 in a supermarket.
Do you remember what you got paid in that job?
It was not a lot of money. I mean, it was fine then, but today I think maybe $1.50, $1.60 an hour. I think whatever the minimum wage was in 1958.
What influenced you to go into teaching?
Actually, I was a chemistry major in college. I had a bachelor's of science. I was not at all going into education. What I didn't mention is that my father was a teacher. And he was actually the chairman of the math department at Oyster Bay High School for about 15 years, from 1950 to about 1970. And so when I graduated from college, there was that little Vietnam War that was going on. And it looked pretty much like I was going to be drafted. And, I wasn't too crazy about that idea. And so my father suggested that, well, if you go into teaching, at that time you could get a deferment. And of course, since he was a teacher, it wasn't that crazy an idea. And I thought about it. I did apply to companies for a job. But at that time, it was really difficult to get, work. I had to relocate either upstate New York or out in the Midwest to get a job as a chemist. And so I started applying for jobs because they were giving deferments. And you have to remember, this is 1968. And just before that, there was a math teacher in this district by the name of Ronnie Janice, who was really very avant-garde with different techniques of teaching mathematics. As a matter of fact, he eventually left Brentwood, went into private industry, and became a vice president of one of the major publishing houses in the country. And I think it was Houghton Mifflin. He became, their math consultant and, was very successful at that. My father, being the math chairman, of course, was attending conferences all over the state on mathematics. And he said, now you have to remember, when I lived in Syosset, the expressway ended it didn't come all the way out. And so you had to get off the expressway and take back roads to come out to Brentwood. And he said, all the way out on the east end, he says, we'll have to look at the map to show you how to get there. But there's a very innovative district as far as math is concerned, since he was a math teacher and I had enough credits to be certified in math. He said, call Brentwood. Why don't you go out there for an interview? And that's really because, frankly, anything past of Huntington was,
the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
So who interviewed you?
Okay, so I got in touch with the district, spoke to Carmela, which was really the first face that I saw to the Brentwood School District. And she said they need a science teacher because I had enough credits to be certified for junior high school math and science at North Middle. So she gave me the directions. We were in the old administration building in front of the public library that's here now. And I went and I met Ed Polupchak.
Okay.
And Ed interviewed me for about 15 minutes. And he said, we just filled the science position, but they need a math teacher at West Middle. Would you be interested in teaching math? So I said, sure, I'd give it a shot. So he gave me the directions to go from North Middle to West Middle, which, if you know the geography of this, was not easy. And I did get lost. and I was in somewhat of a panic. I eventually stumbled across Southwest. So I walked into the front office of Southwest, and I said, I'm looking for, West Middle, West Junior High School at the time. And they said, well, you're close. And they gave me the direction, and it wasn't too bad. So I got there a little late, but I then interviewed with Jeff Dwyer, Bill Lapp, and the interview went for about a half hour. And they offered me the job, and I said, fine. And that's how I started working. And I was at West for 18 years. And it was a great experience.
I know that one of the things that you did there was bring in computers. Would you like to tell us how that came about?
Well, I was, any project of this size is really a lot of people that are involved. To give credit where it's due, the person that was really one of the major foundations of technology in the district and computers is Tony DeMarco, Charlotte Deschamps. They were the ones here at the high school. And, and it's really a budgetary thing. The high school always has so much more money than everybody else. And so it should be the place where things are started and experimented with. And then those things that are successful, then we pass it along. At the time, we had math labs. And it was really felt that, computers could help kids in remediation with math. And so it was actually Tony and Charlotte who delivered the first computer at West. I was just totally fascinated by it. I got into a couple of verbal arguments with the actual math lab teacher at the time, because I wanted to take it home over the weekends to work on it, to learn how it worked, and write programs, because at the time there were no programs for these computers. If you really wanted to do anything original or meaningful, you had to learn BASIC and program the computers to write these little instructional school programs there at the time. And literally, would work until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, Friday night and Saturday night, because I had to bring it back Monday, because there was only one in the building. And of course, I had to almost, remortgage my house with insurance, because that was the only computer. So, but we went through that. I went through that. And I really took to it. And I wrote a lot of programs in BASIC. One of the things that I wrote, and this sort of gave me a leg up when they started creating the computer consultant programs, was we had a school store. And in order to know what was selling and not selling, Darlene Phillips, who's now the principal at West Middle, and Kathy Maroney, they were running the school store. They had to do an inventory at the end of every week. And they would count up how many pencils were missing, this, that, and the other, and then they would add up the money. And then they'd see, what they needed to order, and also if there was any theft. But, I'm sorry.
Could we stop the tape, Eric?
Okay. Hello, Donna? Hi, I'm in the middle of an interview.
Okay, we were talking about the bookstore inventory program.
Right. So I wrote a program that actually tallied up, by them entering just what was left, would give a printout of how much was sold, and then how much money should be generated from what was sold. And that sort of was pretty impressive. I mean, I was impressed by it, but it was impressive to other people. And so when they started talking about putting in computer labs, my name naturally came up at West. And so when they interviewed for the position, I was one of the few people that could really demonstrate that I had been using technology and I understood it. So that helped. But the administration at West was also very supportive to using technology. And as you know, your husband Alex purchased a Commodore 64 for us. We were one of the first schools to have that. And we started working with that. There was another gentleman that worked with me at the time who retired quite a few years ago, Larry Summers, who was also another math teacher. And, we were able to show that things were helping kids. And so administration was willing to work with us to build that up. And we had our own little network of Commodore pets in the early stages. And then the thing that really turned things around for Brentwood was Guy DiPietro put a bond issue through about 15 years ago. And part of that bond issue was technology. And Pete Demento, who was a retired principal from the district, and Ed Polupchak, who's also a retired administrator, really felt very strongly that computer technology was the thing that we should be doing with our students, having them learn. And so they pushed with Guy DiPietro to have the technology installed. And the first bond issue basically put a computer lab in each building. They were standalone computers, but they were, at the time, state-of-the-art for what school districts were having. And that's really what started.
And you've also done work at the Teacher Center with helping to train teachers to use those programs.
Right. Any program can only be successful if the teachers are in service and in service properly. And of course, Jerry Brophy at the Teacher Center, recognized early on that computers are an important asset to a school district. And we worked together to set up actually a computer lab at the Teacher Center for in-servicing. And we put together, in the last few years, I think, one of the best in-service programs in the state. We call it PETA, Participation in Technology Advancement. And it's an 8 one-credit courses. the teachers have a choice of either taking the 8 1-credit courses and getting 12 credits towards their pay scale, pay increment, or they can get a laptop computer. And the laptop is for those teachers that have already maxed out on in-service courses, so it's an incentive for them to take it. But what's really unique, though, about this certificate program is that we start at the very basics, literally how to start the computer, how to save files, how to print. But the last course that they have to take is actually a curriculum project that they must do with their students. And this serves 2 purposes. Number one, it actually walks a teacher through the process of creating an instructional project that they have to use with their kids. And secondly, we take those projects and it starts to build a cadre of lessons by teachers in Brentwood that relate to our demographics and our hardware and our software that other teachers can use. And we take those successful outcomes and we put it on our intra-district network web server called Baron. And so that's the link that we have with the Teacher Center.
That's really fantastic. I know I've had the pleasure of taking a couple of your in-service classes.
You don't seem too badly scarred for that.
No, I learned a great deal, and it's serving me well. How's it going with the computers in the actual classrooms now? Since I retired, I think you've put them in most of the 6th grade classrooms. Yes. How's that going?
Well, it's only really the second year with the 6th graders. We installed them in the middle of last year, and this has been the conclusion of the first year. It's really going spectacularly well. Not consistent in every classroom, of course, but we're getting students doing really phenomenal work. We had, and I have to really admit that Mary Pat Lyons, who was a elementary teacher and then was an elementary math consultant and has now, for the last 5 years, been my assistant at the district instructional media center. And her responsibilities are on the elementary level, have done a phenomenal job in preparing the kids as they moved up. We're getting so many reports from the teachers at the middle schools that the kids are so well prepared that the projects that they're able to do are far beyond just instructing them how to use the programs, but now they're actually implementing them. And we're getting kids doing phenomenal work with HyperStudio, PowerPoint, AppleWorks, desktop publishing. 4 or 5 years ago, as a committee, we put together what we would hope that 7th graders would be able to do with technology, a series of outcomes. We're doing just about all of them now in 3rd grade. And so what we thought 5 years ago would have been a challenge for 7th graders is routinely being done now by 3rd graders. So it's really improving tremendously.
A tremendous boost up that those children are getting from those programs.
Yes.
Terrific. If you had to pick a favorite year in the 30-some-odd years you've worked in Brentwood, do you have one?
Well, see, that would be 34 years. Boy, that's a tough question. The favorite year?
Yeah. Do you have a year that stands out as...
I have got one that stood out that wasn't my favorite.
Okay, let's hear about that one.
Actually, yeah, it was a horrible year. I was chosen for grand jury for the Southwest Sewer District. Oh, and I thought it was going to be like for 30 days, like most grand juries. It turned out it was 2 or 3 days a week for about 7 months.
Oh, my God.
And which meant that I had subs in my classroom. I was teaching at the time 8th grade math. And the kids just didn't relate to me. And by about January, it was just horrendous. You know, I just, and every time I would try to establish myself, I'd be out of the building. And so that was really a horrible experience. And the thing is I felt I was entrapped because they really didn't tell us the scheduling of the grand jury. I thought it would be for 3 weeks or something and be done with, you know. They never told us that it was going to be this kind of a schedule. So that was a horrendous year. But in terms of a good year, I have to say that I really always enjoyed teaching. I always enjoyed kids. What I can say is that as an administrator, and I have been purely an administrator for the last 6 years as the coordinator, is that I really do miss working with kids. I really do enjoy working with kids. I enjoy really watching them develop and grow. I enjoy that relationship of kids coming back after they leave your classes and to talk to you. And really, that friendship is something that I miss. But I would have to say all the years have been really good.
That's good to know. So, which of all these accomplishments would you point to as probably the thing that's most significant?
Well, this surprises most people when I say this. The greatest pride that I have is in working with Barbara Mascaro and developing the elementary library program. The technology part of it, even though I enjoy it and I love it and it's great and I feel very proud of it, was almost a given. Parents want it, the district wanted it, they provided the funding, they gave me the wherewithal to develop that. But the elementary library program, which most people don't know, there was none. All right. For almost 30 years, the Brentwood School District did not have elementary librarians. They had them for a very short period of time, and then they were eliminated with budget cutbacks. And for basically the last 25 years, we just had clerical help watching the libraries, but we did not have a library program. I always felt very strongly that libraries are very important, very key to a child's education. And so Barbara Mascaro and I worked really very hard to sell it to Les Black, Christy Tadaldi, and eventually to the school board. And so we've worked hard in developing the program, in getting librarians hired. This was a whole new venture. And we're really seeing the fruits of that labor now with kids and what they're gaining by having a librarian in the elementary schools. So that's the thing that I'm really I feel very proud about that. I feel really accomplished that as an administrator, I was able to facilitate that program being developed in the district.
Yeah, that is very significant. At Northeast, we were fortunate to have Eleanor Bezada, and although she was paid as a clerk,
right,
she certainly knew her way around the library. But of course, Eleanor was not in every one of our elementary schools.
Right.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. What are your plans for the future?
Well, I've been very fortunate in that since I had the opportunity to really develop a technology program in Brentwood, and it's really so robust, so encompassing that it really educated me tremendously. So that actually August 1st, I start a new career working as the assistant to the director of marketing and sales for a company called Educational Technology Associates. They're over here in Hauppauge. And to really develop and expand their education programs. And it's basically setting up technology programs in school districts that are not quite as advanced as we are in Brentwood.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah. I haven't really gotten totally excited about it yet because I'm still doing what I'm doing from day to day. Every once in a while driving home, I go, boy, this is going to be exciting now. I can be really creative and so on and so on. So, yeah, I am looking forward to it, but I'm not
I don't hear any vacation time in there, though.
Just July, 4 weeks. Yeah.
Are you going to travel?
Not 4 weeks, no. We might do, little local things, but I don't think we're going to do any traveling in July.
We had a phone call interrupt our interview. A young lady from the New York Times.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that article?
Sure. She's writing an article about wireless technology. It's the latest technology that we've instituted here in Brentwood. We have 30 wireless computers in every building. It's sort of like a portable lab that can go into any classroom at any time and be used. And we're one of the few districts in the area that have actually instituted that. And so she was asking me about specifics like, how did you finance it? How do you implement it? That kind of thing. And, I'll probably be like 3 or 4 lines in her article, but she was just going to get our experiences for that.
This is something that's come into the district since I left. Could you tell me a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. What we do is the computers have the ability of communicating to other computers wirelessly rather than through a cable. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's why they call it wireless networking. There are no cables involved. And but they have to communicate to a receiver or a base station, as it's called. And so we take a base station and we plug it into the network. And now all the computers within about a 300-foot radius can now communicate to that base station. So that if you, as an English teacher, wanted to work with your kids in the classroom, just bring the computers in, their laptops, open them up, use them. They can get their user accounts, they can print, they can go out on the internet, they can do anything they need to do. And it's portable. Now, the reason why we're moving into that is a couple of fold. Number one, we're running out of classroom space. Although I could probably set up 2 or 3 computer labs in every building in the district, we don't have the room to do that. So space is at a premium. The other thing that's happening is the explosive use of the computers is forcing us to start to set up computers that are dedicated to a specific subject area. There's only a finite amount of storage on a computer. There's only so many different types of applications you can put on one computer. So what I'm hoping, that will be continued is that we'll take 30 of these wireless computers and let's say set it up for English. Take another 30, set it up for math, another 30 for science and social studies and maybe art. And these would be dedicated with programs just for that particular subject area. The beauty about it is that 2 or 3 teachers could share that wireless lab. And so if you needed it on Wednesday, no problem. Bring them into your room, open them up, use them. You may only need them for 2 or 3 periods. It's sort of like the way we share TVs and VCRs today. But now it would be a whole lab.
So your single computer room then could store enough, say, for 50 classrooms.
Exactly.
As opposed to only 36 children being able to be in the lab at a given time.
Exactly correct. And
that's a fantastic
right.
improvement.
Right. And that's the model we're looking to go to.
Because I know when I retired, which is 3 years ago now, computer lab time was precious. Scarcer in hen's teeth, and it wasn't really being utilized by everybody in the building.
Well, they couldn't. I mean,
no.
If you had 60 teachers and everybody wanted to be a week in there,
you couldn't.
We don't have 60 weeks of school.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It was impossible.
Right.
And that was with just a fraction of us being interested in using it.
Exactly.
So that's a fantastic improvement. Is there anything that we've left out that you would like to add to this?
Well, the thing that I would like to say, my overall experience in the Brentwood School District, I've had the opportunity of working with a lot of districts in Nassau County, Suffolk County, and a couple of them upstate New York. We say it a lot amongst ourselves, but I also hear it from a lot of people outside the district. We are a very unique district. We really do get along by and large. And a lot of that has to really go to Tony Felicio. I mean, he's been the lineage for the last 30 years in the district. And that's not to say that, we haven't had differences of opinions and so forth and so on. But when you experience and see the alternative situations in other school districts, you find out that it really is great to work in Brentwood. We really do take care of our own. Sometimes I kid Les Black about it. I say, yeah, we take care of our own almost to a fault. At times we're too compassionate. There are times when maybe we should take action about certain individuals or certain situations. But we are compassionate. We give people the opportunity to really do the best that they can. And again, any one system is not perfect, but we really do. Many of us understand the history because we've been here for 30, 34 years. Nobody's really out. Oh, I'm sorry. He left, I think.
Okay, so you were saying about our uniqueness here in Brentwood.
Yes, and we are really unique. As strange as this may sound, and this would never happen in almost any other school district, I have never, ever had to justify what I wanted to do to the superintendent's office or to the school board. I have explained to them what I want to do, and they said, go ahead. They trusted my judgment implicitly, and they trust the judgment of everybody. That's not to say that there aren't problems from time to time, but we really are given to a great degree the opportunity to be as creative and hardworking as you want to be. And that's what I've really enjoyed about Brentwood. And from my own personal experience, whether I was a math lab teacher, a computer lab teacher, or a classroom teacher, or an administrator, I never met a wall. Mm-hmm. They allowed me to work as hard as I wanted to accomplish as much as I wanted. And I appreciate that. I really do. And we, I think we should be very proud of the work that we do in Brentwood. Most people really don't understand the difficulties of our demographics, our low property wealth, and yet, the district has hung together. We've succeeded in many, many areas, and by and large, we get along.
There hasn't been a person to sit in that seat in all the interviews that I've listened to, and all of the ones that I've heard, that hasn't said something similar about how wonderful it has been to work in Brentwood with the diversity, with all the problems. We hang together and we take whatever resources we have and make the most out of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really is a lovely thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lovely thing. Thank you very much.
No, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate you coming into the
you're welcome.
interview.
Thanks for asking me.